Over to Colleen, and I'll be helping Colleen go through the slideshow here. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, great turnout. And Colleen, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Good morning. Thank you so much for coming. I really had fun doing this presentation a couple of years ago at the Front Range History Conference, and I had heard about the women spies in World War II, but I thought that's where it started. But then when you start, I thought a lot of things started in World War II. But when you start going back, you find that these programs have been going for a long time. So today we're going to talk about Saints and Sinners, Women Spies of World War I. So women have always participated in war, on the front as well as on the home front. During World War I, women in England and France shared the duties of war by nursing, procuring medical supplies and food, and working in factories and government offices. Women in the occupied countries of France, Belgium, and Holland carried out these duties, as well as protecting themselves and their families from the Germans. A small cadre of women, however, worked in the very specialized work of spies. And now, to my surprise, this was already in my presentation, and here is the poster. Now, this is a poster about women spies, but this came out in World War II. But I thought it was interesting that the same whole aura of women, don't trust women, loose lips sink ships, don't whisper, pillow talk to anybody because you never know where that's going to go. So this says, beware of female spies. Women are being employed by the enemy to secure information from Navy men on the theory that they are less liable to be suspected than male spies. Beware of inquisitive women as well as prying men. See everything, hear everything, say nothing concerning any matter bearing upon the work of the Navy. Silence is safety. Well, those same rules applied during World War I. But they didn't have the propaganda posters out then.
This was World War II?
This is World War II, yeah. Yeah, because we didn't really have a Navy over in France in World War I. We just had the armed forces. In the early 20th century, society viewed women as part of the domestic sphere, as daughters, wives, and mothers. They stayed at home and were not allowed into the all-male business and military domains. However, when World War I erupted in 1914, women found a way to enter the world of men through the business of espionage. At first, men were reluctant to use women as spies. They thought women would, quote, act only for reasons of love or revenge, not capable of the platonic patriotism that drives men, end quote. Because of military service, there was a shortage of men. Women became a valuable asset to their country's intelligence gathering operations. Women spies encompassed a wide variety of personalities, education, ages, classes, nationalities, and professions. Those in occupied zones exhibited an added patriotism and resistance to the enemy that made them dedicated spies. Women spies served in 3 different ways: by gathering intelligence in the government bureaus and in the field, by giving passage to soldiers in the underground, and by using their seductive skills to gather military secrets from men. Women were well suited for these tasks because they provided better cover, risked less suspicion, and went largely unnoticed. Thousands of women carried out these 3 important roles of secret service during World War I. While some women became famous for their patriotism, most worked behind the scenes in the Secret Service offices in Britain and France. Few people today realize the vast number of women who helped their government with surveillance during World War I. The rapidly growing government agencies needed workers, and women's labor was a cheap and viable solution. The British military intelligence MI5 network employed more than 6,000 women between 1901 and 1918. Women accomplished many diverse tasks as Secret Service agents. They developed invisible inks made of lemon juice, perfume, and even semen. They invented elaborate codes used by the military. They processed civil information for use of search, seizure, and arrest of citizens under suspicion. They monitored censorship and suspicious mail, and they analyzed news, looking for propaganda, security information, subversion, and sabotage. Some women worked in the field as scouts and judges of character. Some recruited other agents, and some carried secret messages. In the occupied countries of Belgium and Holland, women gathered information, set up escape networks as couriers or passeurs, and distributed propaganda. Women looked harmless and could move about freely, selling produce, visiting their families, or attending at births. Women spies in World War I developed the modern forms of military intelligence gathering, espionage, resistance, and clandestine activities that are still used in war today. British and French women staffed security offices during World War I. The British office DORA, Defense of the Realm, created press and postal censorship and code and cipher systems to listen to enemy transmissions. La Dame Blanche, the White Lady, employed 1,000 British representatives in German-occupied territories. The agency recruited women as couriers, territorial observers, train watchers, and monitors of troop movements and technology. Some women who worked for La Dame Blanche were formally militarized and became spies, couriers, and saboteurs in the English observation corps on the Western Front. The women of these networks received medals and the Order of the British Empire awards after the war. These two intelligence bureaus relied heavily on women's spy work. And just an aside, I did find some information after I had done this about the Hello Girls. And that was a group of women who were recruited by the Army Signal Corps. And they needed telephone operators to go to the front to listen to all the communication that was going through from the generals to the front lines. And so they advertised in the state newspapers for women to be these operators, these Hello Girls. And they got thousands of applicants, but you had to, first of all, you had to be trained in how to be an operator, which was quite complicated at the time. You know, that was the switchboard when the telephones were first, started. So they had to have switchboard talent, as well as they had to be able to speak two languages. They had to speak French or German or Dutch. And then they also had to be, they joined the Army. They, were recruited as Army. They trained them, they sent them over, they lived on the front in tents and barracks, just like the soldiers. They got as close as they could to the front. In the meantime, all the linemen were stringing all of this telephone wire to communicate with each other. And then, so they really weren't spies, but they were intelligence gathering and communications. And then after the war, of course, they were totally not part of the service. They said, no, you were never really in the service. You just were, doing this job. And one of the women who, I know, this was like in 1920, she started a movement to get those women in, militarized so that they could get veterans benefits and veterans burials and all of that. And it took until the 1970s, and she was the only one left. She was like 95, and they finally, Congress finally passed that they became part of the military. So she did get her military burial, but all the rest of them, it was years later. It was 50 years it took them for Congress to make them part of the military. So I thought that was really an interesting story. They really weren't spies, but they were part of the communication that was going on the front. Okay, Ann. A second group of women spies were nurses and safekeepers, those who found safe passage for soldiers. The most famous nurse spy was Edith Louisa Cavell, 1865 to 1915. Cavell was an English nurse, and she started the first school for training nurses in Belgium in 1907. In 1914, when the Germans arrived in Brussels, her school became famous as a hospital for battle casualties. She treated the wounded of both armies, Allies as well as Germans, placing her above suspicion. The nursing school became the heart of the Belgian underground that lodged and hid refugees and became a drop point for guides who moved the soldiers to safe houses. She obtained new identities and couriers to help over 200 wounded soldiers to escape to France and England. German spy Georges Gian betrayed Cavell. He pretended to be a French doctor and discovered her underground work at the hospital. She was arrested and detained on August 15, 1915, and put on trial for harboring foreign soldiers and aiding the enemy, but not for sabotage, or not for espionage. She pleaded guilty and was imprisoned in Saint-Gilles prison. She stated, quote, "I have done what was my duty. They must do with me what they will, standing as I do in the view of God and eternity. I realize that patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred or bitterness toward anyone," end quote. Edith Cavell was so revered by her countrymen that as she stood against the wall, facing the firing squad on October 12, 1915, some of the shooters fired wide, and one refused to shoot. He was killed and buried in a shallow grave beside her. Okay, Ed. And then the next one. Her body was later returned to England with a ceremony in Westminster Abbey, and every second year her hometown of Norfolk holds a flower festival called Swardeston on the anniversary of her death. And this is a statue that's in Trafalgar Square in London celebrating Edith Cavell's service. The Germans used Cavell's death as an example to the occupied territory to discourage resistance and secret service. The Germans posted warnings throughout the area. Whoever knowingly aids in any manner whatsoever an enemy of Germans in concealing his presence, whether by giving him lodging, by clothing him, or buying him food, is liable to the same punishment, death, or penal servitude. Her execution had negative repercussions for Germany, however, and afterward the German Kaiser insisted that no other woman be executed unless he reviewed the case and gave the execution order. I mean, she was just a nurse trying to, help people. So she was all about, do no harm. There was international public outcry and protest in Allied and neutral nations following the news of her death. London newspapers called for vengeance, stating her death as, quote, one of the most appalling wickednesses yet perpetuated in this war, end quote. The British used her image in propaganda posters, postcards, and recruitment efforts as a martyr to the Allied cause. Some say her death helped bring the United States into the First World War. She became a symbol of the heroism that embodied the women spies. Edith Cavell represented many women who served as spies and safekeepers in the underground during World War I. They were a myriad of ordinary women who imperiled themselves and their families by acting as safe housekeepers and couriers for the men in the resistance. Louise de Bettigny and Gabrielle Petit worked in occupied countries for the British Secret Service. French woman Bettigny, 1890 to 1918, was the queen of the spies, known for her courage, ingenuity, and resourcefulness. She was recruited by Captain Cecil Aylmer Cameron and became part of the intelligence operations in Folkestone, England, across the English Channel from Calais. She had a facility for languages and disguise and operated one of World War I's most successful spy rings, the Alice Network. She used the false name Alice Dubois and developed codes, inks, and military strategy near Lille, France. She reported on German activity. Okay, I think I need the next slide. Yeah. She reported on German activity, artillery placement, and train travel. She watched military emplacements, troop movements, and airfields, and traveled to Britain 19 times to report her findings. She traveled between France, Belgium. Am I doing that? Is that me? France, Belgium, England, and the Netherlands, and passed reports, collected information, and checked on her agents. She used coded messages wrapped around rings or hairpins. So she would put these little messages, stick them in her hair, and pass them along. She tucked messages under cakes in cake boxes, and she slipped messages in between pages of magazines. She sneaked across the border under German searchlights and armed sentries and bluffed her way through checkpoints by juggling packages, using multiple forged identification cards, and playing tag with local children. She would just start playing with these kids and they'd go across the checkpoints. Nobody would stop her. When urged to be more careful, she laughed, "Bah! I know I'll be caught one day, but I shall have served. Let us hurry and do great things while there is yet time." Bettigny was arrested in October 1915 and imprisoned in Syberg, Germany. She defied prison authorities and even led a strike while she was in prison on September 27, 1918, to protest the making of munitions. So she got the other women in the prison to go on strike and refuse to make munitions for the war. After her trial and sentencing, Louise wrote, "I accept my sentence from the Council of War with courage. I have a feeling of pride because I refused to denounce anyone, and I hope those I saved through my silence will be grateful. I would never denounce those who did their duty for their country." Louise died in Cyberg prison of a pleural abscess in 1918. Her body was repatriated in 1919 and a public funeral held in 1920 after the war. A member of the British intelligence said years later, possibly during the course of the war, 1 or 2 services equaled hers. No one ever surpassed it. And after I had written this paper, I was just ahead of my time, I think. This book came out, and this is the Alice Network. It's a fictional, it's a historical fiction of people who are based on Alice, on Louise. And Kate Quinn, the author, did extensive research about her, and it's very accurate historically, this story. There's some other characters that, are totally made up. But she was in charge of the Alice Network, and she recruited all these other women to be in the spy network, and they passed messages back and forth all through, from Germany to the Netherlands, France, Belgium, all the way through the war. And, luckily she was not executed because of that, because of Edith Bell. But anyway, if you want to know more about her. And then Gabrielle Petit was also part of this network. They were friends and they worked together. And that's in here too. Okay. Gabrielle Petit, 1893 to 1916, of Tournai, Belgium, became a part of the British Secret Service and used disguises and false identities to carry and gather information and observe troop movements and technical tactics. She was arrested and imprisoned in Saint-Gilles prison, and when she defied her prosecutors, she was tortured and executed by firing squad on April 1st, 1916. She became a symbol of courage and patriotism, and her statue in Belgium carries her message, and I will show them that Belgian women know how to do it. Martha McKenna served in British intelligence in several ways. She was a nurse at a German hospital, a waitress in a cafe, and billeted several German soldiers with her family. So she had ample opportunity to gather information. She passed messages to a local informant, a vegetable seller named Canteen A, thought to be harmless because of her advanced age. So this old woman would go through the town with her wheelbarrow of vegetables and sell her vegetables in the town square, all the time passing coded messages to people that were buying her vegetables. So they had quite a network going, and of course women were never suspected. You would never suspect, an old lady who's selling vegetables of being a spy. She roamed the countryside with her produce cart and delivered messages to Martha McKenna. Her informant enabled Allied bombers to target and attack ordnance trains and depots. McKenna and another agent knew when the trains were coming, and they dynamited a supply depot, which led to her arrest and imprisonment on espionage charges. She was imprisoned for life in Ghent. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill said of her, quote, "She fulfilled in every respect the conditions which make the terrible profession of a spy dignified and honorable." Helene Briand was a French double spy who received money from Germany to spy on soldiers and ammunition manufacturers in France. She secretly worked with French unions and published an underground newspaper. She had influential friends in the French national newspapers and often dressed like a man to travel through France collecting information. She was judged treasonous by the First War Council, a much fairer tribunal than the Third World Council. There was a double standard for women in the intelligence world. Spying was not glamorous, and it was not the profession for a lady or a gentleman. If a woman had to dirty herself by spying, she must keep her reputation intact. The fleurs de mal, flowers of evil, as they were called, were still virtuous. They may have been coquettes, but they were never prostitutes, and they resorted to the customary feminine wiles to obtain information. Okay. The third group of women, however, who spied during the war were the spy seductresses, women who served their government through their intimate relations with the enemy to obtain information. No figure better represents the image of the female spy seductress than Mata Hari, the best-known woman spy in history. She became famous not only for her alleged espionage, but for being the symbol of decadence and treason that many associated with women spies. She engaged in sexual activity with distinguished military and political men of France, Holland, Belgium, Germany, and Russia. The French and German governments both used her as a double agent. She was a powerful warning to other women regarding the dangers of mixing espionage with erotic behavior. Mata Hari was the ultimate new woman of her time, a symbol of one who used her independence, freedom, sexuality, and self-definition to get her needs and desires met at the expense of men. Okay, next one. That's it. Yeah, go back one. Go back, yeah. Thank you. Mata Hari was born Marguerite Gertrude Zeld, 1876 to 1917, in Holland. She married Army officer Rudolph John MacLeod when she was 18, and they were stationed in Java in the Dutch West Indies. After they divorced, she adopted the Malaysian culture, all the rage in Europe, and named herself Mata Hari, Eye of the Dead. She became a popular exotic dancer, stripper, and prostitute in Paris. Colette, the French writer and dancer who replaced her, said, "She barely danced, but knew how to undress gradually and move her long, lustrous, slender, proud body." As she aged, her popularity faded, so she supplemented her income by seducing and receiving favors, clothes, jewelry, and furs from high-profile men. She incurred considerable debt because of her decadent lifestyle, but her lovers paid for her indulgences. Her Holland citizenship allowed her frequent travel across international borders, and her various liaisons attracted the attention of French and German intelligence officers who began tracking her activities. She was recruited by a German admirer to spy and was named H-21. The Germans gave her invisible ink to use for secret messages, but she immediately threw it away and never used it. In order to support her wounded lover, Russian Captain Vladimir Demaslov, Mata Hari went to the French consulate and asked for the head of counter-espionage and offered her services to spy for France. She accepted a lucrative assignment from French Army Captain Georges Ledoux to pass military information to the French government. So now she's spying for Germany, and she's also hired by France to counterspy, so she has become a double agent. She traveled to Belgium and Spain on missions for France. There is little evidence of any actual secrets that she told her French and German lovers, but she seemed to be ready to help anyone or do anything for whoever asked her as long as she was paid. She stated, quote, "I thought I could manipulate those who wanted state secrets. I thought the Germans, French, English, and Spanish would never be able to resist me, but I was the one who was manipulated." In retrospect, she was a needy, greedy woman, always envied but never respected. She used men to support her luxurious tastes, even though there is no evidence of any military intelligence that she ever passed to either country. The French could find no evidence of contact with an enemy agent. In the midst of war, however, her actions were suspect and she was accused of espionage. German military attaché Arnold van Kohler was determined to expose her, so he sent false telegraph through unsecured channels to Berlin, exposing her French and German double agent activity. She was arrested on February 13, 1917, and sent to Saint-Lazare prison. Okay. She is at the end of her seductive career. Quite a difference. At her trial, the only concrete evidence they found was the gossip of high society salons, nothing of military value. As she said, "There is zero concrete evidence against me beyond what I myself encouraged to boost my own importance." André Mornay, her lawyer, stated years later, "The trial was based on deduction, extrapolations, and assumptions. Between us, the evidence we had was so poor that it wouldn't be fit to punish a cat." At the time of her arrest, the Allies had failed to stop German advances. The French were suffering huge losses on the front, and military morale was low. The French government was under tremendous pressure to catch spies, since real or imagined spies were convenient scapegoats for explaining military losses. In response, French President Georges Clemenceau brought charges against more than 500 foreign citizens, and Mata Hari was caught in this net. She was executed on October 13, 1917, by firing squad. She went to her death without restraints or a blindfold, protesting her innocence until the end. Her body was buried in a shallow grave, never located. Her head was cut off and stored in the Anatomy Museum and then disappeared. Its absence was not discovered until the year 2000, and it has still never been found. So somebody stole her head. And it'll probably show up somewhere. On eBay. She became a symbolic figure of the enemy spy and a wayward woman, the archetype for the spy seductress for years to come. Okay, and then this book also came out after I did this presentation. This is called The Spy, and the author, Paulo Coelho, found all of the letters that she wrote while she was in prison and wrote a historical novel based on her letters. And she had a very sad, very abused life, and this was her reaction to it. It's like, I'm gonna, get whatever I can out of all those people that abused me. So this one is also a historical novel. Okay, next. Mata Hari was not the only spy seductress who worked during World War I. Martha Ballenfeld Rischer, 1889 to 1982, also known as Martha Richard, was recruited by spy master Georges Ledoux, the same one who worked with Mata Hari, to spy for the French in Madrid. She became the mistress of a German naval attaché and double agent, passing information to the Germans and Ledoux as well. She was decorated by the Legion of Honor in France when the war was over. So she was an actual spy who did get rewarded. Perhaps the most mysterious of the prostitute spies was the Lady Doctor, a woman shrouded in mystery, yet never identified by name. And so I could not find any images of her because nobody really knows who she was. Some speculate that she was either Anne-Marie Lester or Dr. Elspeth Schragmuller. She worked in the German censorship office before moving to the Antwerp, Belgian Intelligence Bureau. Fraulein Dr. Schragmuller trained other women agents to infiltrate England and France in her famous spy school. She was intelligent, efficient, devious, and sadistic. She embodied all the stereotypes and fears about women by being sexual and voracious, yet controlled and cold, a symbol of power over men. She was the archetype of the foreign spy, the ultimate threat to susceptible men. Most spies were efficient, caring, courageous, and nameless, but the seductive ones formed the cultural image for all women in Secret Service work. Men saw them as ruthless and predatory, and they became a useful image of espionage in media, fiction, and the popular imagination after the war. This gendered visions of female spies. This vision overshadows the crucial role of women in the intelligence industry. And this is the role that produced posters like this, that you have to be careful of these seductresses, although most of the women spies were not that way at all. They were really serving their country very patriotically. Women were necessary and essential in gathering information in places where men could not go, but their heroism and presence of mind was somehow humiliating to many men. Women spies were executed to send the message that no one enjoyed special protection from treason, and women could not hide behind their gender when they took part in activities that were punishable by death. Thousands of women spies helped create the Secret Service used in World War I through the intelligence bureaus as safekeepers and as seductresses. They served their governments in essential and important ways, but are still perceived as exceptions to the traditional roles of women during wartime. Women served their countries in many capacities during World War I, but their most dangerous and heroic role was their service in the world of espionage. Any questions or comments? The flyer that you put out for this has a lot of good information in it too. So take that with you, and so thank you, Ed. Yes. Well, which ones?
Well, not the operators,
Yeah,
because they were
right.
agile.
Right.
But how were the others researched? Like they didn't
Although I am
put an ad in the paper, but
No, but they, I mean, for instance, Louise Bettany, who did the Alice Network, was working with the underground, because this was in Belgium and Holland and France, and there was a big underground resistance movement going against the Germans. So, they were printing newspapers, they were hiding people, so they had this whole underground movement, and they were recruited from the underground, and they, were watching each other to find people that they could trust, and she would recruit people that she knew from, working in the underground.
The Lady Doctor, the spy school, was that only for women?
Yes, yes. She she was very sadistic and, yeah, from what I read about her, not a lovely Edith Cavell. Or even kind of an, selfish, greedy, mad heart. I mean, this woman she was
Where did she get her
torturing.
money? I mean, where did she recruit, or did they just send people to her after they had recruited?
I just think that there are these networks of people that find each other. I really do. I think, you find each other and you are the company you keep. I guess.
I know you've done a lot of research on World War II also. And did you come across anything that, like, the opinions of women spies changed drastically when the next war came? Or were there a lot of women in the Second World War?
Yes,
Spies.
Tokyo
Well,
Rose and
Did
all
they
those,
have,
yeah.
did they have a better opinion of them than the World War I?
No, it's
So they
like,
were still-
don't talk to, no, because women were in that role that you're home making the victory gardens, taking care of the kids, working in the factories, supporting the war effort. You're not in the underground, I mean, they were mothers and wives and patriotic citizens, so, this was very much out of their perceived role as women to be doing what they considered men's work. I mean, espionage is men's work. It's dirty work, it's dirty, immoral work. And they just didn't feel like women should be doing that. They should be, supporting the troops. And, yeah. So, anybody else?
One more thing, oh, go ahead.
Is there a book on the doctor and the spy school? Is there anything written
No,
on that?
I just ran across that doing some research and I couldn't find, and they don't even really know who she was. I mean, there are different opinions about, she could be Fraulein Doctor or she could be this other woman.
Right.
I mean, she was very underground,
Wow.
yeah. So we don't even really know who she was, let alone ever have a picture of her.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I just want, so you had mentioned two women who might be this unknown character. One was the doctor, the other was Anne. Somebody, could you remember her last name again? So she gets the.
Anne Marie Lester.
Anne Marie
Yeah.
Lester, thank you.
Yeah, everybody's going to go. I did not have time to do research on all those people.
So one more thing, I didn't mention earlier at the beginning of the talk, but Colleen's talk is the 144th Coffee and Conversation that we've done since 2012.
Wow.
And it goes without saying that we're very proud of this series of talks that we've done since then. And we've got many more to come. And so we thank you again for coming today. And if you have an opportunity, come and see many more in the future. And thank you. If you have any more questions for Colleen, you can ask her questions one-on-one. And again, stay around and check out the museum. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.